answer that. I mean, Darren's point's a good one for everyone in the room, that a lot of people see the media as a problem, and on a lot of occasions they're part of the solution. So you shouldn't fear it. You should try to embrace that and use them to actually help you solve some of the problems that you have. And clearly Darren's example is a good one, where they're part of the solution. You form part of that solution with them, but you've got to look at them in that way. They're looking for rich content, you're looking to tell a message. Somehow you can do that together. They're not mutually exclusive, those things. So some of the venues we deal with, I think, are quite scared or quite put off about the media. And I think the best examples are when venues and their event partners, the sports, work hand in hand and they're saying the same thing. And so that example at Suncorp was, Alan Graham's team and our team came together and we agreed on a key set of messages, and we became the spokesperson on behalf of the venue and the sport. The one thing media will continue to look for is what we call internal conflict. They'll look for conflict within the base of influence, so either within our sport or, in that example, someone at Suncorp Stadium saying something different to what we were saying. And once media can break you down and find internal conflict, they have very, very good content in which to talk about, and that creates great debate. That's what they look for. They look for it in sporting teams, in clubs, in situations, in crisis situations. They look for internal conflict. There's nothing they like more than finding the chairman saying one thing and being contradicted by his coach somewhere else. That's a really great thing for media because they get great content out of it. So stopping that at the outset and making sure you're very clear on who's speaking. And when you're speaking, it's very clear that you need to know what you want to say, but what's equally as important is what you don't want to say. So you've got to be prepared to know your boundaries, and you can't say things that either aren't factually correct because they'll come back and haunt you, or don't open the door for other questions to come at you. And quite often, that's the most important part to prepare yourself for. Know what you want to say, but equally what you don't want to say.
And so I, as a journalist, when I front up at an incident like one of these, but say I'm a TV correspondent, as I used to be, I would be dispatched to come back with the story, or at least a story. So I'm not going to be able to go back to head office and say, oh, I haven't got anything. I will find something. What's the thinking from both of your points of view about responding to that? Because the instinct would be, just don't tell them anything until we know everything. How is counterintuitive, isn't it? How do you manage to try and give them a story, but make it the story you want them to have and not a different story? Yeah, you'll always walk away from me with a story that'll be hopefully the story I want you to tell rather than the one you want to tell. Right. And that's important because everyone has a job to do.
Yeah, that's right. And so we go in with our eyes wide open. So just because someone asks you a question doesn't mean you have to answer it. And again, that's really important. You can actually get through any key message you can consider without answering a question. So if you go back and look at the most skilled operators, mostly in politics, they very rarely answer the question, but they continue to get their message out.
Yes, they affirm the question. They say that's a very interesting question. You make a very good point, which leads me to this completely irrelevant point that I want to make.
Which is what I want you to write a story about. That's right. That's how it works. And you can never say it too many times. I think research tells you that you have to say something 11 times for someone to actually grab it. And there's different mediums here. So radio is different to print, and print's completely different to television. Television's about impression. So television's very much about body language and about how you actually interact, and people listen through their ears and they listen through their eyes. So they're actually looking and they're trying to find visual cues. So your impression can be either very, very good or very, very poor, and that will control your message. So all of those things are important, but the key part here is knowing what you don't want to say and sticking to that.
I want to go on to talk about some of the things that haven't worked perhaps so well, but let's talk about this, the way you present yourself and the thing about repeating the message. In these days of sort of 24-hour news channels, where if I turn up with my TV camera, I'm just as likely to put you on live and put everything you say to air, not just that little 10 seconds. Does that change the way, Darren, you think about dealing with media and repeating that message, or do you still do that?
No, I don't think it changes the thinking too much. I mean, there are obviously different dynamics between, live TV, recorded TV, radio, print, etc. But the principle for me is still the same, and that is, particularly when we're talking about crisis situations as well, things are moving at 100 miles an hour. It's very difficult to stop and pause and think about what message you want to get out there, but it's absolutely critical that you do. I find time and time again, if someone is phoning me on the hoof or trying to get some information out of me, I don't feel bad by saying, hey, that's very interesting, thanks very much for your question. Could you just tell me what other information you have got? Could you just tell me where you've got that information from? What information do you need from me? It's very important you get it, so if you just leave it with me for an hour, a couple of hours, or whatever time frame it might be, I will get back to you as soon as I can with as much information as I can provide you. What that does do is it enables you to have the thinking time to work out exactly what is it that what message I want to get across. Because if you're on the fly, you're in a crisis situation, and then you're reacting to the media, particularly in a situation where you go live on TV, you're not prepared, you haven't prepared your message clearly, and that is going to come across. So for me, making sure that you know some techniques to give yourself some time to prepare those messages is really important.
Todd, are you largely dealing with journalists that you already know, or are you dealing with journalists you don't know, and how much difference does that make, building relationships with media representatives in the field that you're in, or the physical location that you're in?
You need to have relationships with the media, but it's clear you've got to make sure there's a big difference between relationships and friendships, and there is a big substantive difference in that, particularly with the media. I got some very good advice very early on in my career, which was this. So some of the people in the room will have heard me say this at the venue management school when we do some media training there, but it's as simple as this, that every single one of you in this room is very passionate about the venue or the brand that you represent. Every single one of you will get up every day and pour your energy, emotion and intellect into doing the job you want to do. And so every day when you get up in the morning, imagine that in your backyard of where you live, you've got a pet crocodile, and every day before you go to work, you're having a cup of tea or coffee before you leave, and you throw something into the pet crocodile and you're feeding. You go through and you work some long days. You work 18-hour days with big events, and you come home at night, and before you put your head in the pillow, you'll throw something back into your pet crocodile. And you'll do that every day, every week, every month, maybe every month for a number of years. And then one day, one afternoon after a long day at work, you'll come home and you'll think you've formed a relationship with that crocodile, and you put your hand in and pat him, and he bites your arm off. That is the media. And that's not being disrespectful to the media. What it's saying to you is they have a job to do. And their job will always come first, as yours does for you. So you have to have the starting proposition that that's the relationship, not the friendship. Because the moment in time that it comes, they will have to do their job. And so that's not a slight on them, that's just a factual statement. So always maintain that. I've always maintained that relationships are important because you have to have the relationships, but you've got to be very careful about the boundaries.
You've got another analogy, I think, involving a balloon about managing a crisis with media and understanding that they have a job to do and trying to make sure that it doesn't get worse. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples over time of a media strategy. You can put your head in the sand and hope it goes away. That's a strategy, but in my view, it's not a particularly good one. I've long maintained the view that when issues arise, you're not judged on the issue, you're judged squarely on how you deal with the issue. So, and that's fortunate in a profession like mine because there's lots of issues. So they won't judge us on the issue as much as how we deal with it and how we communicate it. So that's what you get judged on. But I've always said that as quickly as you can, using the balloon analogy, you've got to prick the balloon. You've got to make sure it doesn't continue to expand without providing some context. So for that, you've got to be well organised, you've got to be disciplined, and you've got to stick to your message, and you've got to be prepared to say the same message over and over and over. And when you're boring yourself because you're saying the same thing over and over, it's probably only just starting to get cut through with the broader public. So being able to say the same thing continuously, making sure you can answer every question but putting those messages through is a great skill, but it's a discipline as well. And in every venue, when you have event partners, it's really important that you work together on those things because you're as important to each other for the success of those messages.
Darren, I've heard it said that the crocodiles occasionally try to trap you or trick you. I wouldn't know anything about that, but what's your observation about some of the ways that journalists attempt to get information from you, and how do you respond?
Oh, I've got a really good example. There's probably on more than one occasion I've had different journalists who phone you up. They want a question they want to ask you. So they ask the question, and you think about it, you respond appropriately, and then they just don't say anything. So there's silence, and what that
the silent treatment.
The silent treatment, and what that means is, we're people, we like interacting with one another. We hate silences. We have to fill that void with some sound. And of course, what you sometimes find yourself is then talking about something else, which is completely irrelevant to the question that they've asked you, but all of a sudden that journalist is now onto another angle and they're asking you some more questions about that. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I said before, you just can't fall into the pitfalls of those sorts of things. You need to be prepared in terms of your message. And like Todd says, if you've got a message you want to get across, just keep on saying that same thing. Don't go off script. Don't talk about the things that you don't want to say. Be very clear about the things that you do want to say and just stick to that.